Lamed Beis Amar Aleph. So we had a discussion of, in the mezuzah, are the parsha supposed to be psuchos, meaning you start the second parsha on another line, or can you start the second parsha on the original line that you ended off the first parsha with? So Rav Huna Rav Huna did his parsha Yosy, and Rav Shimon ben Elazar, who was Rav Huna's Rebbe, did his parsha psuchos. So Amarti Loi, I told him, Rebbe, Ma Tam, what's the reason why you have them psuchos and not stumos? Amarli, even though when they're written in the Torah, the parsha of Shema stumos, because the next parsha that's in the Torah, which is V'hayaki V'yacha, starts on the same line. When he wrote it in his mezuzah, he was makbid to write the second parsha on a different line. So why? Amarli Hayol ben Smuchos Minat Torah. Correct. When the parsha of Shema is written in the Torah, it's stumos. But guess what? The parsha after Shema isn't the parsha of V'hayom Shema, like we have in the Megillah, in the Torah. Rather, it's V'hayaki V'yacha. So since we're placing the parsha of Shema together with another parsha that's not right after it in the Torah, therefore I make it psuchos. V'yom Rab Chanana Omarav halacha Rab Shimon ben Elazar. So the halacha like Rab Shimon ben Elazar had a whole bunch of halachas. He said, "Asher Revach Lamalav or Revach Milamata, Asher Psuchos." So Pashas he meant halacha like Rab Shimon ben Elazar for everything that we quoted him on. My love, even up psuchos, and then it will be shver because Rav Huna made his mezuzah sestumos. Why wouldn't he have done like his Rebbe, who paskins like Rab Shimon ben Elazar, that it should be psuchos? So Gemara loy, that when no one ever paskined like Rab Shimon ben Elazar when it came to the shaila of psuchos, they paskin like him when it comes to the halacha of revach, how much space you have to leave on the top margin of a mezuzah and how much space you have to leave at the bottom margin of the mezuzah. The chama revach, Amar Menachos Yaakov, Amar Rab Shmuel bar Yaakov, Kamoli Atva the Sifri, which is where we finished yesterday, which is the thickness of some type of clip with which they would clip the cloth down so it shouldn't roll while they're trying to write the mezuzah. Amalei Abaye Rabbi Yosef, V'at Lo Tizbracha, Dechi Amar Rav Arevach. You're not going to agree with me that the only place where Rav pasked like Rab Shimon ben Elazar was Lagabe the Revach and not Lagabe the Psuchos and Tesumos. The Rav is Leminhoga. We know Rav always follows the minig. Whenever there's a minig about something, he follows the minig, and we're going to see that shortly how. And now Nog Alma B'Sesumos developed Vierzich to write mezuzahs B'Sesumos, where the next parsha starts on the same line as the parsha that ended. So how in the world would you even have a hava in it to say that he paskins like Rab Shimon ben Elazar, who holds the mezuzahs written psuchos? The Omer Rabba, Omer Rav Kahana, Omer Rav, Im Yovei Eliyahu v'Yomer. And now we're going to demonstrate how you know that we follow the minig. Because what if Eliyahu would come along and he would tell us in Hilchos Chalitza, v'Yomer Cholitzin b'Minol. You make Chalitza with a minol. By the way, our minig is to do Chalitza with a shoe, with a minol. What if Eliyahu came along and said, Cholitzin b'Minol, you Cholitzin b'Minol, Shoymin Loi, we would listen to him and we would start using a minol for Chalitza. But if he said, Ein Cholitzin b'Sandal, which is what we've been doing until now, using a sandal, Ein Shoymin Loi. We don't listen to, even if Eliyahu Hanavi came, you know why? Shekfar Nohagu Ha'om b'Sandal. So you see clearly, Rab follows the minig, even to the point that he would not listen to Eliyahu Hanavi if he came and told him to stop doing the minig, v'ma mezach kafirt. Rabbi Yosef Amar Rav Kahana Amar Rav, Im Yavo Eliyahu v'yomer ein cholitzin b'minol. If Eliyahu would come along and tell us ein cholitzin b'minol, so if we were obviously using a minol until now, and if he came along and said ein cholitzin b'minol, shoymin loi, we would listen to him. But if he said ein cholitzin b'sandal, ein shoymin loi, why? Because our minig is sandal. Shekvar nohagu om b'sandal, because the minig is to do b'sandal. The minig is not to do b'minol. So therefore, if we said don't do it, it's not really violating our minig because we don't do it anyway. But sandal, which we fear to do, and he told us not to, we wouldn't listen to him. So you see clearly that Rav follows the minig, so therefore Rav would surely say that the mezuzah is done b'sesumos. Now we had two expressions over here, Lagabi, this Hashayla of Eliyahu becoming. In the first expression, it said, then it would be Shayman Loi. But the second member was, so frankly, what's the difference? So would we use a minnow now? Right now, we'd be able to use it before Eliyahu comes and says that. If you're going according to the Mandamar who's glorious, that if Eliyahu would come and tell us, then we would listen to him and use it. Well, obviously up until now we wouldn't. Kosover, now we don't know minnow until Eliyahu will tell us. But the Mandamar that Eliyahu we would allow it. So the question was, at that point, did they allow a minnow or not? Again, we only use a minnow. It must be, since Rav always follows the minig, when you pass on like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, it must be a ravach shma minah. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar, it was never a stira. It was never a stira. Rav Huna Paskins that you do the megil, you do the mezuzah b'sesumois. Reb Shimon ben Elazar did psuchos. Mitzvah la'asos and stumos. Avad it's a mitzvah to do with stumos. That's the right way to do it. We have din of psuchos shaperdami. So my psuchos to come Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So what did Reb Shimon ben Elazar mean when he said psuchos? It's mashma. That's how it's supposed to be done. Al psuchos. That's all Reb Shimon ben Elazar meant to say. Really, he paskins sesumos, and that's what Rav Huna did, and therefore there's no stira. But Reb Shimon ben Elazar adds if you did it wrong and you did it psuchos, it would be good as well. But the right way to do it is sesumos. Let's see if we could bring a raya. In other words, a raya that it's psuchos. We learned Sefer Torah Shabbalah. If you have a Sefer Torah that got worn out, and the question is repurposing it, or the tefillin Shabbalah, or tefillin that got worn out, and tefillin has a higher level of kedusha than mezuzah, Rashi says because it has 4 parshias versus only 2 parshias. Ein oisem mezuzah. You're not allowed to make a worn out Sefer Torah into a mezuzah or a worn out tefillin into a mezuzah. Why? So the first question you would want to ask is, how exactly do you convert a Sefer Torah into a mezuzah? So there's different opinions as to how this would be done. One opinion is found that what you would do is you would cut out from the Sefer Torah, from the parish of Shema till the parish of Ahoya, and everything in between, and that would be the mezuzah. The question is, there are those who hold, and we'll see in the Gemara later, that you can't have anything in the mezuzah besides the 2 parashas. So that wouldn't work. So then there are those who say that what it's referring to is, let's say you finished writing one of the parashas, and you didn't write the next parasha yet, right? So you would use that, and you would continue writing the right parasha on it. So that could be the case, where you're going to be using a Sefer Torah Shabbalah as a mezuzah. You're repurposing it, but you can't do it. Why? Which is mashma that there would be no other technical problem. It's only because you're not allowed to be married to kedusha. So if there wasn't a problem of being married from kedusha chamor to kedusha kala, you'd be able to make it. You've had problems. Amai hachas esumos v'hachas psuchos. The mezuzah has to be written psuchos. Right? If you hold the Shimon ben Elazar psuchos, then the mezuzah has to be written psuchos. But in the Sefer Torah, the parashas are sesumos. So anyway, you wouldn't be able to use it. Elamai must be that either Shimon ben Elazar says it's kosher with the evet psuchos, or with a pasuk like him. But I'll call upon him from this brayso you see beferish that you could use psuchos. Zok to Gemara, Dilma lahashlim. Maybe it means lahashlim. Zok Rashi. This is also a big discussion of what lahashlim means. Dilma hadu dakinan ha maridin oisin shemchasra mitfilin mezuzah. Now we have to fix this verse a little bit. So we're going to look at the test. In the Yosy, he makes a whole long shtickle out of it. He says, if I can get this to focus. Oisin mit Tefillin mezuzah im chasra, lo lasos mezuzah kula mi sefer Torah, the la'olam psuchos ba'inan, aval im chasra mezuzah shita achas. Let's say a mezuzah was missing one line, and you want to just cut a line out of the sefer Torah and sew it together. Ilav the ein maridin hayunotlin shita achas mesefer Torah v'toifin b'mezuzah umashlimin haisa. That's what it means. It means you're using a line. You're not taking the whole parsha. You're just finishing off a line that you needed to borrow from the Sefer Torah. So therefore, maybe that's what it means. Frag to Gemara, okay, but back to our same shaila. Ha-maridin notion. So you're going to tell me, if it was maridin, you would be able to be mashlim. But Tanya we learned, halacha la-moshe misinai, tefillin ala klaf, umezuzah ala duch sustus. Now, what is klaf and what is duch sustus? So the klaf itself, when you skin an animal, the skin is thick, and the skin actually has two layers. So zokt the Gemara, klaf is b'mokim basar. Klaf would be, if you would split the two layers, the inner layer would be referred to as the klaf, and duch sustus is b'mokim seir. The duch sustus is the outer layer of the skin of the animal. So, so the Allah is. I'm sorry. It's punk for carrot. I think it's punk for carrot. Klaf is the outer layer, and the sustus is the inner layer. So klaf b'makam basar. On the klaf, what surface of the klaf do you write on? You write on the inner surface of the klaf. So klaf, once again, I made a mistake. Klaf is the outer layer. But what surface of the klaf do you write on? You write on the inner layer of the klaf. And the chsustus b'makom seir. And the inner layer, the chsustus, when you're writing on it, you write on the side that's towards outside. So at the end of the day, side the klaf, side the chsustus, the surface of it that you write on is the surface that mates with the klaf and the chsustus. Where the chsustus and the klaf touch, that inner layer, that's where you write on both types of klaf. Zok to Gemara. So how could you repurpose tefillin to be a mezuzah? You have the wrong type of klaf. Zok to Gemara le mitzvah. The chatchila you're supposed to write on the chsustus and on the chsustus for the mezuzah. But if you wrote it on klaf, it would be good anyway. I vatanya shina puzzle. We have a brayso that says that it's b'di'evet. So again, how could you possibly contemplate writing the mezuzah or using tefillin for mezuzah if it's written on klaf? It's supposed to be written on duch sustus. So tomorrow, b'tefillin, the brayso that says it's makiv is by tefillin. So by tefillin it's makiv. If you wrote tefillin on the duch sustus, it would be possible. But if you wrote a mezuzah on a klaf, it would be kosher. I vatanya shina bein bozeh puzzle. So now it's a checkmate. Bein bozeh Pashtus means sai by tefillin, sai by mezuzah. Zok Gemara, no, idi v'idi b'tefillin. V'had the chesvinu aklaf b'makom seir, v'had the chesvinu aseir b'dechsustos b'makom basar. Meaning, if shina b'zeh means you wrote on the wrong surface. You wrote on the wrong surface of the medium that you have. So either you use klaf and you wrote it on the outside, or you use the chsustos and you wrote it on the inside. That's where it says by tefillin either one would be possible. Zok to Gemara weiter. Aval mezuzah klaf shaber dami, but you still don't know that you cannot write a mezuzah on klaf. V'bay sema shina bezeh bezeh. That is a machlokes tanaim. So it's a machlokes if you wrote mezuzah on klaf, if it would be kosher or not. And the brayso that says the only reason why you can't do it is because in Meridin will hold that if the mezuzah was written on klaf, it would be kosher. The Tanya. And what it means is shina b'zeh is possible. It means if you used either medium but wrote on the wrong side of it. Okay. Zog to Gemara weiter. Or you could say, no, it's a machlokes tanaim. Yes, you have a brayso that says shina b'zeh b'zeh is possible, which would not stem with our brayso that says that the only reason why you can't make tefillin into a mezuzah is because of Meridin. Taka doesn't stem. But we have another brisa, another Tana who holds that you could write mezuzah on cloth, and therefore that's who our brisa would be going according to, who says the only reason why you can't is because of my reading. Tonight, Shina Bezot was a puzzle. Rab Acha Machshir Mishum Rabbi Choi Rab Chanina, V'amula Mishmei de Rabbi Kiva Rab Chanina. The olive sticks in the word matir, I think. Omar kosher. It says kosher. Hamaridin. Okay, so period. So now we have a makor. The bride that it says the only problem is maridin. It holds that by mezuzah you would be able to write it on cloth. So the Gemara is hammering home the same question. Hamaridin Nason. So once again, you're telling me that if it was maridin, you would be able to repurpose tefillin to be a mezuzah. Avabay sirtut. The halach is a mezuzah needs sirtut. They have to put lines, with a knife. They put lines into the cloth, like we see on the Sefer Torah. But a tefillin does not need sirtut. So how could you possibly use tefillin for mezuzah? It doesn't have sirtut. The Omar Rab Menachos bar Chalakya, Omar Rab Chama bar Gurya, Omar Rav, Kol mezuzah sheina misurtetes psula. Rab Menachos bar Chalakya, the day Omar sirtut shel mezuzah halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's also machlokes tanoim if a mezuzah needs sirtut even b'diavad. The Tanya Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Mishum Rabbeinu tefillin u'mezuzahs nechtovos shalom min aksav. First of all, you could write them even though you're not copying over from something else. You could write it by heart, and the Gemara tells us it's because people know it. There are parashas that people are familiar with. The ein tzrichos sirtut, and they don't need sirtut. The hilchasa tefillin loy by sirtut u'mezuzah by sirtut. V'idi nechtovos shalom min aksav. My time is up to Gemara because the migras greasing because people are familiar with it, so we're not worried that the sofer will make a mistake. They know the parsha well. Omer of Chabli, Ana Chazisi Rafuna. I'm sorry. That's what it says. It says we don't have sirtut. Yes, I guess we don't. Omer of Chabli, Ana Chazisi Rafuna. I saw Rafuna. Davi Yosef Apurya. The Sefer Torah Allah, I saw him sitting on a bed that a Sefer Torah was on. You might think that's not so bakavadik. He's sitting on a bed that a Sefer Torah is on. V'chaf l'chada, he took a jug and put it on the floor. V'anach Allah Sefer Torah, and he put the Sefer Torah on the jug. V'hada Yosef b'mita, and then he sat on the bed because he took the Sefer Torah off. Okay. Kosover he holds, also Leshiv al Gabimita Shesefer Torah Munachala. It must be that Rav Chelboy Sarah Rav Huna held that you're not allowed to sit on the bed if the Sefer Torah is on it. That's why he took it off, and that's why he put it on the cut.
He
didn't actually sit. He wanted to, so he moved it away first. Upligi de Rabba bar Chana. To Amar Rabba bar Chana Amar B'Yochanan Muter Leishev. Al gabe mita shesefer Torah munachala. You're allowed. If you're going to ask me a kasha from a story that clearly shows that you cannot sit on the bed if there's a sefer Torah on it, because my sefer Rabbi Lozer, he was sitting on a bed. And he noticed that there was a sefer Torah on the bed. He quickly jumped up. And he sat on the floor. The nidma kami she'akise nachash. He looked like he was in such pain that he violated the covenant of the Torah, sitting on the bed, that he looked like he was bitten by a snake. Zok to Gemara, Hasam sefer Torah al gabi karka hava. Rashi explains that there was like levels of this bed. He was sitting on the bed, and the sefer Torah was on the lower part of the bed. That's what bothered him, because he was even on a higher level than the sefer Torah. That was the issue. Let's have a look at Rashi. For Rashi, while you're right, so let's have a look. You said, "V'nidlu Rav Al Gabakaka how you say Torah mushlach. Dika b'zoni yiseita lekach nitzar." Oh, so he doesn't say it's on the floor.
The Rashi says it was on the floor.
The Rashi says,
right.
So he brings that. I was referring to. So I must start that. The Rashi brings that there was like levels of the bed, and it was on a lower level of the bed, so it wasn't appropriate. Amar b'Yidam Shmuel, kasva igeres psula. What if you wrote a mezuzah like an igeres? what does it mean to write a Megillah like an Igeres? So Rashi, v'lo sirtot, v'lo diktot b'chaseres v'yaseres kigeres alma. So he wrote it like a regular letter without being makbid on writing it with the structure of a mezuzah. It's going to be possible. My timer, also ksiva mi sefer. We learn up ksiva from a sefer Torah. If we look at the psukim, it says chsaftam al mezuzahis, and it says no the chazak the sefer krisos from a get. What if you hung the mezuzah off a stick? So instead of mounting it straight onto the doorpost, you mounted a stick off the top of the door frame that came down some way parallel to your doorpost, and you mounted the mezuzah on that post, not on the doorpost itself. So I can show a picture that the Masifta has. So basically you took a piece of wood and you connected it to the top of the door frame so it runs partially down the door frame parallel to the frame of the door, and you put the mezuzah on that, but it's not directly on the door frame. Or you put the mezuzah behind the door, not within the door frame itself. Sakana, it's a sakana, ve'ein ber mitzvah, and there's no mitzvah in it. Shalbeis munbaz hamelach.
Maybe that makes the mezuzah in Victoria like a shtetl.
Why?
Like this huge piece of wood that you stuck in with them.
So the story goes with Munbas Hamelach. Munbas Hamelach, his people, they traveled a lot. So they were always staying in hotels. So they never had a permanent house. So how did they do with mezuzahs? They always had a mezuzah on a stick, and wherever they went, they hung the stick to the door frame, and then when they left, they took it with them. You have to put it within the door frame itself. Pshita, bisharecha amar achmana. Bisharecha means in your doorway. So you know, there are some doorposts, you go to Yerushalayim, the walls are so thick, you can have a doorpost that's 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet thick. Where on that doorpost are you supposed to put it? Closest to the Rosh Hashanah. So you see it's good on the outside. Kama the merchak mali, the further it is, the better. Kamash malon, that it's got to be within the doorpost itself. So let's have a look a little bit at Tosfos, because Tosfos asks a good question. What do you mean it's a sakana? You didn't do the mitzvah of mezuzah properly if you put it in the wrong place, so you don't have the shmir of mezuzah. So all I just say is it's not kachasa, and obviously you don't have the shmir of mezuzah. It sounds like there's something even worse than not having the shmir of mezuzah. So Zok Tosfos, Pirish B'Kuntris, Kivon She'asa Shaloi Kechasa Eina Ba'is Mishtamer Mipnei Mazikin. The mezuzah won't do its magic because you didn't put it in the right place. The kosher will in town. If that's what it means, then can have it in the memory. Let it say that. Sakana is matri. There's an additional problem that this creates. It's not just that you don't have the shmir of the mezuzah because you didn't do it properly. That's what it should have said. The nira, much more practical. The Torah Menachos, the problem is you have someone hanging down in your door frame. Naked Parasha, you're going to bang your head. It's a sakana because you have an obstruction in your doorway that someone could bang your head. This sounds like a machlokes of Shmuel coming. Shmuel says it's a sakana. You got to have the obstruction. You're going to bang your head, right? The law of Adaita, you don't notice it. The chen hachayra adelos. So too, if you put it behind the door, not in the door frame, regila lias perletes, it'll stick out from the wall. It's a position that can cause you to bang yourself. That's why it's a sakana. The Torah you can hang it on a hollow, in some type of hollow thing. It doesn't mean literally hanging it, because then you would have a problem over here that you banged it. So that's we have a little bit of time. So there's another very interesting Tosfos that discusses: are you stam allowed to write psukim? Are you allowed to write psukim in a letter? You quote psukim or not? So there's a big discussion about it. So let's just have a quick look at Tosfos. I'm not going to learn the whole thing, but we'll hop it on a little bit. How could you write a mezuzah that needs sirtut? Maybe it's speaking that you had tefillin that you made sirtut on. So what makes you say that that's an impossibility? In those days they did not make sirtut on a Sefer Torah and Tefillin, even though they sirtut. Since they didn't need, they didn't do it. So since they didn't need it, they didn't do it. And it's brought in the Seder of Rambam, so now it's already, the Levin strikes again, we're into the Megillah season, so it says about the Megillah, it's Divrei Shalom Ve'emes. Melamed Shetzrich HaSirtut. The Gemara tells us that from there we learn that the Megillah needs Sirtut. Ka'amita Shal Torah, like the Torah. Like the Moshe Pirishon B'Kundris, the Mari B'Sefer Torah Mamish, Ela b'mezuzah ka'amar, shehi amita shel Torah, sheyesh b'malchus shemayim, u'chedemuch ha'chara, the mezuzah b'sirtut. It can't say that the Megillah needs sirtut like the Torah, because the Torah is saying here that the Torah doesn't need sirtut. So it must be referring to the Megillah. V'teida, the even Sefer Torah, to Pirish HaKundris, if it's by a Sefer Torah, like the Rashi is learning, Haylo lidrash midenikra sefer, k'dedashin nosam, the drasha achriti midenikra sefer. We could have used a different sor, that since the Megillah is referred to as a sefer, so therefore at Sefer Torah it needs sirtut. Why do they need a special limit of divrei shalom ve'emes if it's being compared to a Sefer Torah? Elamai must be compared to a mezuzah. Okay, let me just find something else. He says something very interesting. The Sefer Torah bears sirtut. Rabbeinu Tam says the Sefer Torah needs sirtut mishum zeh keli vanveyu. Avol tefillin demechusim be'or, but tefillin, since no one sees it anyway, loy bei sirtut v'lo shayich b'noi. Uksas tema the Meshomech Alfidim Mezuzah b'Sefer Torah b'Gzeir Shava ksiva. Now we just had the Gzeir Shava of ksiva. V'amaylo Alfidim Mino Sefer Torah Mimezuzah le'yin sirtut. If we have the Gzeir Shava of ksiva, why wouldn't you learn sirtut from it? V'chitem le'yin ksiva lo Alfidim halakamon bo yulemelaf le'yin ksiva savanim. Okay, where do I want to get to? Oh, here it is. Umeha Amar Shenoyagin Lichtayv Be'igor Shalomim. You're allowed to write in just a regular personal letter. Arba v'chomesh tevois min pasuk. You're allowed to write some words quoting from a pasuk, but why sirtut? Even though there's a chiyuv to make sirtut, mishum de osru eladavka shekosev a pasuk lidrasha kei uvda Rabbi Yosy de Gittin. If you're writing the pasuk to learn from, you want to make a dik of a pasuk, you're quoting a pasuk, there you're not allowed to write it unless you have sirtut. Someone that's just using the words of a pasuk because it sounds geschmack, surely below sirtut, you'd be allowed to write it without sirtut. They would write the pasuk not in the right order. The communion Gimel the Megillah, Mal Michtav, Tartin Klas Milam in a pasuk. You're allowed to write 2-3 words from a pasuk. Ma'uk v'sholach lo'ishkalusha, da'avadomach v'koi be'zimra Yisrael, al tismach ba'amim. So he actually wrote words of a pasuk, v'chayolach al shas halanu. So there is a discussion if you're allowed to write some letters of a pasuk, some words of a pasuk without sirtut. I'm not sure if that's only if you're using it like a cipher, or what if stam you're writing, or maybe you just use a lined paper. I don't know, but there's definitely a shaila about writing stam psukim without having proper lines. Okay, we'll stop here.
Break it up.